Okay, why don't we just start
Yeah,
and kick it off?
awesome. Again, thank you for having me. I'm going to
Sure.
go through, do a bit of a deep dive on the insurance world right now, the landscape. Um, yes, we have the landscape of kind of what's happening right now in 2026. We have some of the trends we're seeing right now for the last year or two compared to what we saw 5, 10 years ago. A lot of coverages to consider and kind of what's important and what might be, some overlooked these days. And then what does it mean for you as an individual? So for set up here. I apologize. So the first thing, you kind of have the whole landscape of what does personal insurance mean for you. Everything falls under your umbrella, which I'll get to last. But what we're really going to talk about today is where you live, so your homeowner's policy, maybe a condo, maybe you're renting an apartment, making sure you have all the right coverages there, as well as make sure you're in the right type of program. What we see a lot in Massachusetts is a lot of older homes that might be a little bit harder to insure. Typically, anything older than 1950, 1960 falls into a totally different category. And then the newer stuff obviously has some different requirements as well. So really diving into the types of property you live in, what you have to cover is really important. Obviously, we talk about auto insurance, your personal autos, anything that might fall under business, as well as something like a golf cart or a utility vehicle, motorcycles, scooters. You can cover all of them, and it's really important again that you make sure these are named right, whether they're owned in your personal name, an LLC, and make sure again they fall under the umbrella. Then you have kind of your fun stuff, your boats, your RVs, campers, UTV, anything that you can get hurt on or have a little bit of fun on. You want to make sure you have covered and covered appropriately. And then collections are very big these days. Obviously, values are going up, so people might collect artwork, jewelry, anything from baseball cards, anything that can be of value that can be replaced is really something you should have covered. These things you can either add to a homeowner's or renter's policy for relatively inexpensive, or you can get a totally separate policy. I typically tell people if it's just a wedding ring or an engagement ring and maybe a watch or two, typically you can put it on your homeowner's policy. Once you have a list of pieces of jewelry or valuables, you really should be looking at a separate policy to make sure all of the values are correct, making sure you have the right replacement costs on it so that if something does happen, you can use it appropriately. And really just staying in touch with your agent, the carrier, to make sure that every year these numbers are correct, nothing changed. The last thing you want to do is be paying for something you might have sold or gotten rid of, and vice versa. If you've bought some new pieces, it's pretty inexpensive to insure these things. So having them listed is really important. And then the last thing is dwelling fire. You might have investment properties, depending on how they're owned. Making sure those are done correctly are very important these days. One thing I see a lot of people say is they might not be so worried about a secondary property if other people are living there. Obviously, the liability can still fall on you as the owner or landlord. But another big thing is people that might be making income from these properties. So a lot of times, if you have a homeowner's policy on a secondary property and you're renting it out either to a long-term, short-term tenant or Airbnb, a lot of carriers actually have a lot of restrictions on this, where either you won't get coverage if something happens, or the income you might be making won't be covered should the dwelling not be habitable. So really important that everything is listed correctly. The insurance companies and your agent know what it's being used for, and that everyone kind of is in the same ballpark when it comes to the usage of things, because all it takes is something that's listed as maybe a personal residence that's being Airbnb. You might not have coverage, so be really careful with that stuff these days. So I'll keep moving. So personal insurance trends, really since COVID, the last 5, 6 years, we've seen really an uptick in pricing. I'm sure everyone here is kind of wondering, why is my insurance still going up? Obviously, costs of everything have skyrocketed in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Real estate has gone up like crazy. The prices have gone up probably 20, 30% in the last few years. So they obviously know what the sale price is. They know what it costs to rebuild these homes. Obviously the dwelling coverages are going way up in the limits, so therefore your costs are going up as well. Um, Materials are really expensive, the rebuild costs, so making sure you stay on top of that every year is really important. Typically a lot of policies will have an inflation guard or something that might increase your policy 2, 3, 4% per year. Obviously, in years like the last 4 or 5, when properties might go up 10, 15% overnight, that's something you really want to make sure you're aware of and that you're listed appropriately. So if you do have a total loss, you're not going to be short hundreds of thousands of dollars because you didn't update it. People could typically say they might keep values low to save money, to save 5% on your insurance and only be covered for 80% of your property doesn't make a whole lot of sense. So make sure you're doing it right. Just a little bit of it. Construction costs this year up about 6% overall, but the last 5 years up about 41%. So on top of your values going up, to actually rebuild that home is going to be significantly more expensive. So making sure you have the appropriate coverages in place is really important. A couple other trends I'm seeing that make things either easier or harder to insure. Some of the really hot button items, trampolines at your home, I'd say about 75% of carriers won't take. Types of dogs, there's actually, if you Google it, if you have a certain type of dog, there's actually lists of acceptable dogs and unacceptable dogs. So depending on the type of breed, some carriers might take you and some might not. Again, a lot of people kind of leave it off their insurance program. Problem is, if you have a dog and the insurance company doesn't know, there's a dog bite, there's a loss that somehow involves that pet. Again, they might not cover you. Pools with diving boards have become kind of a hot button item, as well as some of the toys we talked about, the RVs, the ATVs, motorcycles. Really want to make sure they're well informed. And then lastly, coastal restrictions worked very tight for a long time, where carriers might not be able to write homes within 1, 2, 3 miles of the coast. They're starting to loosen them a little bit, but make sure if you are near the coast that you kind of know what you're getting into. You budget that into it, because sometimes the prices get pretty expensive when it comes to coastal property. And then lastly, a lot of the higher net worth, and it's a bit of a loaded topic right now, but homes over that million, 1.2 million in values, a lot of the carriers are going to require central station alarms, maybe burglar alarms, automatic water shutoffs. And a lot of times they'll actually require these to bind the policies. Typically, they're a few $100s each. We really recommend them. It gets you really a lot of protection. And obviously, if a loss does happen, they can be cut down much quicker if you do have these pieces in place. Again, anybody with questions on that, feel free to reach out. We actually have connections to different companies that can install these for you. It's very simple, pretty inexpensive, and again, will save you a lot of headaches in the future. And by the way, if there are any questions coming in the chat, I'm not reading the chat, but happy to pause and answer whatever people have. Just a couple more of the trends. So, there's a lot of harder states right now, Florida, California, people with secondary properties. These rates, actually specifically in California now, are absolutely skyrocketing. There's only a handful of carriers that will take certain properties now. So anyone that might either live in Florida, California, have secondary properties, again, before you make a purchase, before you make any changes, rent it out, thinking about selling it, make sure you're well aware of the cost of insurance. A lot of people underestimate how much insurance can cost on a $500,000, $1 million home. In Massachusetts, it's usually a few $1,000s. In Florida and California, that you can be looking at tens of thousands of dollars for a pretty basic property with a lot of restrictions. So making sure you're checking in on that is very important these days. A lot of these events, so we've had, like this slide shows, in 2025, multiple billion-dollar weather events. So these are essentially catastrophic losses, carriers consider it. So that dips into reinsurance, and that dips into different types of levels that most carriers don't take into account often. And this is what's driving a lot of the rates. I believe it's been 18 or 19 straight quarters where we've had catastrophic losses in New England. Again, it's kind of been nonstop. Losses have kept rolling in for these carriers. Loss ratios are higher. And with costs going up on everything, it's been really a kind of a rough few years for the carriers. Again, none of you care. You want to keep your bills as low as possible. And we're starting to see some relief this year in a market kind of softening. So be on the lookout for different opportunities. Maybe shop your insurance out if you haven't in the last few years. because there are opportunities to up your coverages and save some pretty significant money.
So Adam, you just mentioned that the premium prices are softening a wee bit. Is that a function of just there hasn't been a major loss recently? Or do they also consider new construction? Do they get preferential rates?
Yes, they definitely give preferential rates to newer properties. Again, in New England, there's so many properties that are 50, 100, 200 years old, which makes it tougher. As new construction starts coming in, they're a little bit more favorable. Again, losses have started to flatten out a little bit after those few really hard years. Costs are starting to flatten a little bit, and carriers are starting to become a little bit more profitable. So they're more open to taking a little bit more risk, taking on things they haven't in the last few years. And they're essentially what we call like buying business, meaning where rates might be high in the past because they didn't want a certain area code or a coastal or a type of risk. Now that they're opening that back up, they're making their pricing a lot more competitive, and they're trying to take on more risk, therefore making the whole marketplace more competitive, and carriers are starting to get a little bit smarter with the pricing.
Thank you.
Of course. So just some of the trends we're seeing. Flood increases are definitely a little bit steep here. And this is one of the things that a lot of people don't think of unless they're living 500 feet from the water. There are certain rules that have changed in the last few years, specifically 2022. I actually had some friends reach out. They were in a very landlocked place recently. They had a little stream about a block from their home. I did a flood quote for them, and it ended up being about $4,500 a year. So this is something that you should always take into account whenever you're buying a new home, moving, whatever it is. Can definitely be a driver of some pretty serious premium. What you can do is you can reach out to any local agent. You can give me a call. We can just type in an address into a portal and find out if you're in a flood zone, the severity of your flood zone, and we can pull a quote in about an hour on what that would typically cost you based on the value of your home per year. Some are inexpensive, a few $1,000s. I just quoted one near a beach in New Hampshire for a client. He was looking to buy an investment property, and it was $12,000 a year. So that actually killed the deal as a whole. Obviously, don't like doing that, but want to make sure that people can crunch the numbers appropriately and know what they're getting into. Again, there are some options now for floods. So you want to make sure you're kind of getting a few different quotes and making sure you know you're getting into. But flood has definitely been I think an overlooked item for a while, and now the cost is getting pretty real for people. Coverage
Reminder, anybody's having any questions along the way, please feel free to use the chat box. We're monitoring it.
A couple other things to consider. Need to have on top of your home or renters and auto. Everyone should have an umbrella policy these days. Essentially, what you're doing is you're getting $1 million, $2 million, $5 million of extra liability coverage over your other policies. So, for instance, your homeowner's policy, on top of covering the actual physical home, you might have $1 million of liability. Your auto, you might have $1 million of liability. Whatever you buy for the umbrella will add to that. So if you have $1 million in your homeowners, you buy $1 million umbrella, you have a $2 million liability loss, you're going to have coverage. Typically, this is much less expensive than people think. The $1 million, you're probably looking at a few $100s a year. And there's a lot of higher net worth people we work with looking at $5, $10, $20 million umbrellas. And the cost is actually surprisingly inexpensive for what you're getting. So again, when you're paying for 2, 3, 4 insurance policies, an umbrella just adds to all of them and really kind of puts peace of mind for you when you sleep at night and you're thinking about the $1 million home and kids running around and maybe a pool or a ATV. It definitely helps out. Guaranteed replacement cost, again, doesn't matter what your home is worth. It matters what it costs to rebuild it. So making sure you can get to where you started from if a loss does happen is really crucial these days. Water backup, flood, we kind of already covered. And any other LLCs, trusts, whatever ownership might be sitting on a home or a property, making sure your insurance company knows where that sits is really crucial, both for payments, both for if there's a loss and they have to write a check, they want to know who it goes to. And should someone pass away or ownership change, they want to make sure they know right where to go and they don't have to stick it up in court, and it might take years to actually get something paid out. So just keeping this updated every year with your agent. It takes 5-10 minutes, and it's really crucial. And then again, for the unlimited loss of use, should your property have damage or a loss, you have to live somewhere else. Making sure those expenses are covered are really huge because they can add up quickly. And again, if you're out of your home for 2, 3, 4 months, the last thing you want to do is have to get another apartment on your own dime or stay in a hotel for $200, $300, $400 a night. So having that coverage in place is really key. And then a couple other should haves. Cyber from the personal side has become a really hot topic. The ransomware, people trying to break into your systems, anything that it would cost to rebuild these systems to get you back up and running is all covered by cyber insurance. Highly recommend looking at it. You can typically add it to your homeowner's policy or get a standalone policy, and it's very inexpensive. So definitely recommend that. Equipment breakdown service. Those are all in your homeowner's policy, and any good agent with some good carriers will put all of that in there. But just keep an eye out. Renewals right now, especially the last year or two, companies are getting a little bit creative with minimizing coverage, not upping coverage as appropriate, and they might slip some coverages off your policies. So again, make sure you review it every year with your agent. It's of no cost to you. We get paid by the companies, and it can do you a lot of good if you do have a loss.
Excellent.
So what does this mean for you? So, the value we show as an agent, I'm able to represent about 50 different carriers, again, both local and national. So I don't get paid by the individual or the client. I get paid by the carrier. It doesn't cost you any more. People think going direct to a Geico or a State Farm is going to save you money. That money is essentially spent on advertising and different things for those companies. So to use someone like myself that can represent you to over 50 carriers is a no-brainer. We want to be proactive and do your renewal reviews. We typically get renewal numbers about 45 days before your actual renewal. So once we meet with clients, get any changes, is the address the same, any new drivers on cars, any new toys, pool, pets, etc. Once we have all that information proactively, we can get ahead of your renewal, make sure there's no surprises, make sure you're not getting a bill 2 days before your renewal saying our insurance went up 25%. What do I do? It might be too late to actually make any changes. So be proactive. Your agent should be on top of you about a month and a half before your renewal. Get that information and make sure you know all of your options weeks before the renewal so that you're comfortable, you know what you're getting into. And once the renewal hits, it's seamless and you just keep rolling. Again, reach out to me. My contact info will be accessible. Happy to do a review for you free of charge. If you're in a great spot, happy to leave it where it is. If you think it can save you money or make any changes to really protect you, we can do that as well. So again, we want to be a resource to you any way we can. So that's all I have from a direct kind of content perspective here. Would love to field any questions from Greg, from the audience. I want to be as helpful as I can for you.
So I'm monitoring the chat window. Feel free to ask any questions there and we'll moderate it. But to kick it off, I got a couple questions I'd like to kind of throw at you.
Sure.
If you're ready for the magic round.
I'm ready.
All right. So what do you think is the single biggest risk for our clients? Like where do they tend to miss out opportunities to protect themselves?
Mm-hmm. I think it's all about just listing, being proactive, doing a review with an agent, and listing everything you have. The biggest thing I think I see overlooked is people might have an umbrella, or first of all, not have an umbrella policy. But if you might have an umbrella policy, the key to an umbrella is making sure everything underlying is listed. So for instance, if I go call an independent agent right now, buy $1 million umbrella and list no policies underneath, first of all, that agent should probably be fired, but there's nothing below it. So a loss actually wouldn't be covered by that umbrella whatsoever. So if you have an auto policy, a homeowner's policy, a collections policy, and then maybe a boater's policy, but they forgot to list the boating policy under your umbrella, and you have a loss exceeding those limits, you're not going to get coverage. And adding a certain policy to an umbrella is only going to cost you $100, $200 a year. So it's a no-brainer. Make sure everything's listed, and having an umbrella for anyone, whether you're a renter, just getting your first job, or you're someone worth tens of millions of dollars. It's all pretty inexpensive, and it goes a long way if something does happen.
So that kind of brings me back to one of your earlier slides. We were talking about replacement costs. So maintaining an active asset inventory. So obviously, when you're first writing the policy for your clients, that's completely up to date.
Mhm.
How does that stay current? Is it under the onus of the client to come back to you and tell you that, or is it at renewal? Do you periodically just do a new asset inventory? How does that work?
So a lot of homeowners policies, I assume you're talking about just personal property in
Personal
general.
property, or well, really any kind of liabilities that you've got
Yep.
on the books. Like, how do you stay
Yep.
current with that?
Absolutely. So a lot of insurance companies, you'll have your coverage A, which is your dwelling coverage. You might have $1 million. They have a
Mhm.
certain percentage that goes to personal property unless you make a change. So that could be 50%. So you might have $500,000 of coverage for your clothing, your collections, your artwork, your jewelry, if it's not listed independently. If you're proactive and you can kind of take an inventory of that yourself, again, it does not have to be perfect. You don't have to count every t-shirt you have for $20. It's more of, the big items, the furniture, the artwork, appliances, whatever you have that might get taken into account and might be new. Going through that when you initially write the policy is big. And then every year just asking, hey, Greg, if you have any big changes, did you do a renovation to your house and you spent $200,000 in the kitchen, or you just bought a new $20,000 watch, whatever it is, having those added every year is crucial, because typically upon renewal, if you take no action, everything will increase 2, 3, 5%. But if it's not accurately representing what you have, it's just kind of a expense adding up and not really specifically covering you as an individual.
One of our attendees just asked a question about, should the list of valuables be sent directly to the insurance broker?
Yes, absolutely. So it depends on the limits. So typically for jewelry, you'll have, if you buy a $200 watch and you have personal property getting over that limit, which everyone should, and you have a fire, something gets lost, stolen, that will be covered. I typically tell people anything over that $5,000 to $10,000 value should always be listed. So you go out, you buy your first Rolex for $20,000. You should either get a separate jewelry policy or specifically list it with either an appraisal or receipt or proof of purchase to your agent. They'll add it. Again, it's short money. Same thing with artwork or anything really irreplaceable. As long as you have something showing ownership, a receipt, an appraisal, proof of purchase, we can add it in. It's pretty simple. But yeah, whenever there's something newly acquired, I know you'd rather take a picture and show it off to your friends and post it on Instagram. But the next call should be to me so I can add it to your policy.
So my guitar collection, I should probably have on the policy, even though I've had it for 30
Absolutely.
years and not insured.
Yep.
Okay, good to know. Note to self. Who needs cyber coverage?
Everybody.
Everybody. Tell us about that a little bit.
So it's in the insurance world, it's been really a commercial coverage for a long time. A lot of companies that might be sending large invoices might be worried about it getting intercepted. Real estate offices sending millions of dollars at a time. It also comes into the personal world as well. You're sending money virtually all the time right now. You're interacting with people, and your personal information is always out there. So having that protected to get you back again to where you were before the loss happened is crucial. This might include legal fees. This might include, helping you reestablish your bank account, your finances. Anyone that's online, which I think is all of us, considering you're on a webinar with me right now, should take a look at this. It covers identity fraud. It covers online fraud, ransomware, cyber attacks, data breaches. And again, it's not just coverage for any money you directly lost. It's for rebuilding systems. It's for repairing any damage, both actual monetary as well as reputational. And again, this can be added to any homeowner's policy for very short money, and it's a pretty important thing to have these days.
Can you give me an idea of what short money looks like?
$100 to $200 a year.
Okay. Well, that's a big takeaway, I think, for everybody. Do you typically offer that as part of your intake when you're
Yep,
this matter, of
absolutely.
course? Yeah.
Yep.
So folks, give that some thought.
Mhm.
Um, I don't see any more questions. Excellent job. Thank you. Wait a minute. Hang on.
All
Anonymous
right.
attendee again. I think you answered this question, but I didn't catch what you said. Even though I just rent, I still have a small homeowner policy to cover general loss, plus an additional fee for my computers and a few pieces of artwork. Should I still look at umbrella coverage and or unlimited loss of use? Good
Yeah,
question.
so unlimited loss of use is a little bit different on renters. So people always think renters policy is one of the most overlooked coverages you can have. People think, I don't own the home. If it burns down, I'm not responsible for it. Depending on the lease you sign, everything, either walls in or studs in, you're going to be responsible for to a certain extent. So all of your personal belongings will not be covered should there be a fire, as well as the liability side of things. So to get a renter's policy for with $1 million of liability, all of your belongings is a few $100s a year. I'd say $250 to $500 a year. You get that liability, and then you can also list those belongings. So same thing as a homeowner's policy. I want to list my wife's wedding ring, my wedding ring, a watch, a piece of artwork. You can add those on. Again, it will add some premium to what you're paying, but it's typically a rate per $1,000 you're covering, and depending on if it's artwork, jewelry, or other like baseball cards, something like that, they're very affordable rates. You can actually Google it. So I highly recommend doing that. Again, any information you have, you can send it over, ask your agent, but it's something very simple you can add to that. And if you have a renter's policy that might not be able to add it, getting a jewelry policy or a collector's policy on the side is very affordable.
Okay, anonymous attendee, did that answer your question? Maybe you'll answer. We'll give you a minute too. I think that adequately covered it, more than adequately covered it.
Awesome.
Okay. Anonymous attendee says, thanks. You're welcome. That I can get, that I
Very
can answer.
welcome.
Uh, All right, Adam, thank you so much. I think that was very informative. Any questions, feel free to direct to my email, jeff@12points.com. Adam, you can offer up your email too for direct questions from the
Absolutely.
group.
Yep. Yeah. A Risman at risman.com. So
Okay,
Risman. And
perfect.
I can actually put it in the chat really quick.
Okay,
I can also put my direct line.
excellent.
Awesome. But thank you all for coming. This was great.
Well done, and thank you for all participating. Jim, you're welcome. And any questions, please feel free to send it to either Adam or myself. And we thank you all for your time, for participating, and we will see you on the next one. Take it easy.
Awesome. Thank you.